Well, good evening. Aren't you excited to be citizens of the free state of Florida? Thanks, John, for the great introduction, and thank you all for being here and all the great work that you have done. I can tell you, as a Floridian, I'm proud of the work, of the role that Florida has played over these last many years, particularly since I've been governor. When freedom and our very way of life and so many other jurisdictions in this country withered on the vine, we in Florida held the line. We chose facts over fear. We chose education over indoctrination. We chose law and order over rioting and disorder. When the world went mad, when common sense suddenly became an uncommon virtue, Florida stood as a refuge of sanity, as a citadel of freedom for people, not just in our state, throughout our country, and even around the world. We faced attacks, we took the hits, we weathered the storms, but we stood our ground, and we did not back down. We had the convictions to guide us, and we had the courage to lead. And because of our efforts, Florida is leading the nation. We are number one in net in-migration. We are the fastest growing state in these United States. We are number one for new business formations, number one in tourism, number one in economic freedom, number one in education freedom, number one in education overall recently by U.S. News and World Report, number one in parental involvement in education. I think it's important to point out that none of that was foreordained. If you go back to my election in 2018, Florida was at a crossroads. We had two very distinct choices in running for governor. It was a very hard-fought election. I was fortunate enough to be victorious, but only by 32,000 votes. That's less than 0.5% of over 8 million votes cast in the Sunshine State, and that really wasn't out of the ordinary for Florida politics at that time. If you go back a decade before I got elected governor races, president races, usually decided by about 1 point, 2010, 12, 14, 16, and then my election in 18. And so Florida was viewed as just kind of an evenly divided state, very precious political balance. And so when I was fortunate enough to get elected, a lot of people give you advice, and a lot of people were telling me, listen, be careful going into this. Don't rock the boat. You don't want to upset this very precious balance. Just, keep your head down, and you may want to trim your sails a little bit. Well, I appreciated that advice, but I did not follow that advice. The people of Florida may have bestowed upon me 50% of the vote, but that entitled me to wield 100% of the executive power, and I would use that to advance our shared principles and values. I would not be captive to polls. A leader does not put their finger in the wind and try to figure out which way it's blowing. You need to know what you're doing is right. And if you're a true leader and you do it and you deliver results, people will follow. They will back you when they see that you're leading. And so to this day, we never took polls on individual issues trying to tell us what to do. We made sure that the people that worked for us shared the mission. You could have the best governor in the world, you could make great decisions, you can have all these great ideas. If you don't have people surrounding you in the administration that share those values and are committed to the mission over themselves, it will not amount to very much. So we told people, if you're signing up for this team, make sure you're focusing on the greater good, make sure you're focusing on our shared agenda, and if you're bringing your own agenda to this, you best just leave right now. We're not going to have you in these positions. And lo and behold, We've got a committed team who've been able to do extraordinary things, and we went on offense from day one. And my view is that I don't want to sit there like some potted plant just hoping that things will work out. And some people get into office, they don't want to make decisions, because when you make a decision, some people like it and other people don't. And so if you just don't get involved in anything, in some respects, you may alienate fewer people, but that's not leadership. We went on offense because it was the right thing to do. I sat at the desk my first day as governor. I looked around in the state capitol at the walls and everything, and I thought to myself, I don't know who's going to succeed me in this office, but they are not going to have much to do. I'm getting all the meat off the bone, and we are going to get all this done if I have anything to say about it. And at the end of the day, when you're talking about being an elected office, all these offices are important, don't get me wrong, but when you're the executive, it's not just about being right on issues. Yes, you need to do that. Obviously, if you have your head on wrong and you're making bad policy judgments, that's a bad thing. But being right on policy isn't enough. It requires leadership. And leadership really means having the courage to make difficult decisions in the teeth of a lot of opposition and criticism. It means you must have the fortitude and the confidence to be able to stand all alone if necessary. And for us, that test came when COVID-19 hit. And I made the decision that as a leader, I had to be more concerned with protecting the jobs of the people I represented than trying to protect my own. And I was willing to take stands that were politically unpopular, that drew massive amounts of criticism, not just from corporate media and the political left, but even our bureaucracy and people like Dr. Fauci, but also even from within the Republican Party and some of my supporters. And some people told me, look, you need to do something different because they are hammering you for this. But my view is you let the chips fall where they may. The most important thing you can do as a leader is know that when you look in that mirror in the morning that you're doing the right things for the right reasons. If you're trying to contort yourself into a pretzel, if you're trying to take positions based on political expediency, I don't think it ever works out in the end, but it's not something that I would have been comfortable being able to look in that mirror knowing that I trimmed my sails when the people needed me the most. And lo and behold, we had a lot of rocky days and weeks and even months, and I was criticized probably more than any governor has ever been attacked in the history of our country, certainly in modern times. But we stayed the course. Florida was open. Our kids were in school. And people noticed that this was a free state. People responded to the fact that this was a free state. So fast forward November of 2022. We don't win by 32,000 votes. We win by over 1.5 million votes. We received the highest percentage of the vote that any Republican governor candidate has ever received in the history of the state of Florida. The margin we won by 1.5 million was almost twice as large as the previous record in a governor's race. We won women by 9%. We won 60% of Hispanics. We won independent voters by 18%. We even took Miami-Dade County, our most urban county, that Hillary Clinton won by 30 percentage points in 2016. We not only turned it red, we won it by double digits. We also won Palm Beach County for the first time in almost 50 years. And we won nearby Osceola County by 7%, which they haven't been able to do in a long time. Didn't quite get orange, but we came closer than any Republican has in a long time. But at the end of the day, politics is a team effort. And I knew that while I was leading the ticket, we needed to sweep in people in the legislature, in school board races, county commission, you name it, and we were able to produce a rising tide that really lifted all boats. We have a supermajority of Republicans in the Florida legislature, and for the first time since the Civil War era, there's not one single solitary Democrat elected to statewide office in the Sunshine State. And so that's what you call winning. And that's what you call vindication, and that's what you call people having your back. But here's the thing. Winning an election is only as important as what you do with it. It's really just giving you a ticket to the dance. But you got to get out there, you got to dance, and you got to deliver on the promises that you made. And I think a lot of Republicans, they talk a lot, and they say a lot of good things, but the follow-through is not always there. In fact, it's not usually there. Well, in Florida, we make big promises, and not only do we meet the promises, we exceed the promises in the results that we actually deliver. Fast forward to my first day in office, I knew one of the reasons I ran for governor was because we had a historically liberal activist Supreme Court in this state. They would contort the law and Constitution and legislate from the bench, and they were intent on torpedoing good conservative policy any chance they got. And it was a 4-3 split, 4 liberals, 3 conservatives. But we knew under Florida's Constitution that 3 of the 4 liberal justices reached mandatory retirement age the minute that the next governor took the oath of office. So I get sworn in early January of 2019, and 3 of the liberal justices were no longer on the court, and I was able to replace those 3 liberal justices with 3 conservative justices. And that took the court from a 4-3 liberal activist majority to a 6-1 conservative majority. We may have had the most liberal court in the country, and we may very well now have the most conservative Supreme Court in the country. And very soon, probably within the next week or two, I'll be making yet another appointment to the Florida Supreme Court. We have Justice Polston, who is retired, excellent justice, and he served for a number of years, and so we will be able to do that. And then that will make it so that 5 of the 7 justices have been appointed by me. And so that's a huge, huge legacy to leave, and that'll last far beyond my term of office. So stay tuned for that. Now, we just finished one of the best legislative sessions, I think, that we've ever had, not just in Florida. Show me a state that has done more than what we've done over the last 6 months. I don't think you can in recent memory. Just in the last 6 months, we have banned the Chinese Communist Party from purchasing land in the state of Florida. We've supported Second Amendment rights by enacting constitutional carry, making Florida the 26th state. We now have a majority that have done that. We enacted legislation to kneecap ESG, environment, social governance, because we understand that that's just a facade for businesses, corporations, and asset managers to try to enact a left-wing agenda without having to go through the normal constitutional process. You know, if your legislators vote for some of that stuff, you have an opportunity to vote them out of office. You don't have an opportunity to vote out BlackRock or some of these big multinational corporations. And so I see them as doing an end run around the normal political process, and they're trying to impose an elite-driven agenda on society without us ever having a say in it. And in the state of Florida, that's not going to fly. We believe that there should be no social or economic transformation without representation. And they got to get this done through the legislature if they want it, and we won't let that happen. We were one of the first states, if not the first, to look ahead and see what they're cooking up in Washington. They're trying to do a central bank digital currency. We think that's a threat to your freedom, and so we banned CBDC in the state of Florida. We understand that there's a massive, unprecedented border crisis going on, and so we took action to pass some of the strongest measures to combat illegal immigration anywhere in the country. We believe in rule of law here in the state of Florida. We also signed legislation in February formally ending Disney's self-governing status in the state of Florida. And just last week, I signed legislation making Florida the first state to eliminate in our university system the idea of DEI. They say it's diversity, equity, and inclusion, but it's an ideological agenda that they're trying to impose on our universities and on our students. And DEI really stands for, as practice, discrimination, exclusion, and indoctrination, and that has no place in our public institutions. Now, I see a lot of these issues through the lens, the lens of being a governor, of course, and looking out for the state's interest and having a vision of what you want Florida to be. But I also look at through a lot of these issues through the lens of a dad, of a 6, a 5, and a 3-year-old. And my wife and I really believe in the importance of family. Some people even criticize me because my wife and I have a good relationship, that we actually get along and we actually confide in each other. Imagine that. And we understand how important family is. We understand how important it is that parents in this state are able to raise kids in a healthy environment. And we've worked really hard to make sure our public policy has made Florida the best place in the United States to raise a family. So we mentioned many of the things that we've done in this regard. We believe that everybody counts, everybody's special, and our Heartbeat Protection Act shows that we say what we mean and we mean what we say. And that's a landmark piece of legislation for this state, and I was happy to be able to sign that provision into law in April. But we also understand that there's much more to do. We have provided unprecedented support for mothers, particularly for single mothers who oftentimes don't know whether they're going to have any type of support. And it's sad that that's the case, but we don't always have fathers who want to be involved. The First Lady has an initiative called Hope Florida, Pathway to Prosperity. And what she's trying to do is get away from the model where you just send somebody a check and go towards a model where government serves as a facilitator to key organizations in the community, particularly our churches. Some states would never allow the churches to be involved in any type of social welfare. The First Lady's launched what's called the Care Portal. You can have a young mother could go in who needs help, provide that they're called Hope Navigators, and they can put in what's needed. And then you have churches and businesses and nonprofits that are connected to this portal, and they will say someone's in need, and guess what? These people respond. They show up, they provide help and what's needed, and what happens is, once there's one connection made, government's usually not involved anymore at that time. A connection has been made, and the community is coming to support people in need. We've also launched a fatherhood initiative in the state of Florida, and we've put big money behind it. And we've worked with people like Tony Dungy, who was the former coach of the Bucks and the Colts. And Tony tells the story when he became coach of Tampa, he started to minister in the prisons. And he would go in and he would do it. And he said it occurred to him that the reason why folks were in prison was not because they were poor, wasn't because of race or ethnicity. The number one reason they were in prison is because none of those people, none of those offenders, none of those convicts had a father in the home. And so the absence of fathers in the home has created a lot of damage in our society. And so we're trying to promote fatherhood, helping some of these dads engage with their kids, making sure that at least kids have some mentor that they can rely on. And if you talk to people that didn't always have advantages, who've ended up doing well, more often than not, they will tell you that one of the reasons they did well was because someone at some point took an interest in them and in their lives. And that's what we're doing in the state of Florida, and I think it's really, really important that we stay the course on that. We're also making our tax system very family-friendly. Now, we don't have an income tax, and we never will if I have anything to say about it, but we do have sales tax, and part of that's, it makes sense to do that. We get a lot of tourists that pay into it, and so Floridians comparatively pay less. I think we have the second lowest state per capita tax burden in America. We're proud of that. But we look to see how can we make a difference in an era of Biden inflation, in an era in which families are struggling to make ends meet. And so we will sign legislation shortly making all baby items, wipes, diapers, cribs, strollers, clothes, all baby items permanently tax-free in the state of Florida.